Welcome to another episode of Estate Planning Nightmares and How to Avoid Them. I'm your host, John Braddock, the author of the Amazon bestseller, Click Here When I Die, and the founder of My Life and Wishes, an online digital planning and document storage solution created to make things easier for those you love. Hey, today, folks, we have another exciting episode for you. My guest today is Chase Gentile. Chase is the principal attorney for the law offices of D. Chase Gentile, a transactional law firm focused on providing client-centered and detail-focused advice for the past 15 years on matters of estate planning, probate, trust administration, and real estate transactions. And for these last 15 years, Chase has continued to develop solutions that meet each client's needs while treating each client as an individual who has a problem, not a legal problem that has to be solved. He connects personally with his clients and creates solutions to address their very specific needs. That is his focus and his guiding philosophy. Doesn't matter whether that means it's a basic will for just a single individual or complex trust administration where each beneficiary might be inheriting millions of dollars. Chase is a lifelong resident of the Chicago area where he lives with his wife, his son, his dog, and his cat. When not practicing law, Chase enjoys time with his family, cooking, attending concerts, and sports on the radio. Welcome, Chase. How are you today?
I'm good. Thank you, John. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure to have you on board. So, hey, we're just getting ready to have a long holiday weekend. It's the 1st of September, and looking forward to a good weekend and roll into the last part of this year.
Aren't we all?
Yes, and hopefully the weather's going to get a little nicer. I know it's been abnormally hot basically everywhere in the country. I guess you've had the same up there in the Illinois.
We did have not very long, but it seemed very long stretch of very high 90s and low hundreds, and we'll be back into the 90s tomorrow for about a week, and feels too hot, but certainly I'm sure better than your weather.
Well, yeah, down here in Arizona, we're used to triple-digit temperatures, but the incredible thing is that we're only supposed to be in the 90s for the next couple of days over the weekend. So I'm not sure if I'm going to need a sweater or not. Probably not, but it'll feel nice. Hey, so again, thanks for joining us. So, as you know, I call my show Estate Planning Nightmares, and then, of course, How to Avoid Them. So, I'd love it if you would share some information with us about some stories and stuff. But before I get there, I want to ask you a question. I always like to ask why. There's so many different areas of law to practice. We've got criminal law, personal injury, family law, real estate, corporate, the list goes on and on. So why estate planning?
Well, for one, I was never one who wanted to be principally in a courtroom. It just wasn't my thing. And I didn't want to be a litigator. And it's, how do you find something that fits you, fits your personality, fits what you feel like your skill set is. And I have an uncle who is a very well-known litigator, and he sent me a book when I was either going into or early in my law school experience with just about every single specialty you could come up with. And paging through that, I found several that seemed, in a very uneducated mind, that they would be good fits for me, not having had classes in really any of them. And lo and behold, after taking classes in some of them, including trust and estates, it felt like something that would be a fit for my personality, and something I had some interest in. And when I started my firm, that was something that I wanted to focus on to the extent that I could. And the longer I've been in practice, the more I've been able to do that, which is quite gratifying.
I love it. I love it. Yeah, as you know, I talk with estate planning attorneys, all the time. Had someone told me about 10 years ago, hey, guess what? You're going to spend your days just talking to attorneys all the time. I would have thought, nope, Never going to happen,
That's
right?
right. Who would
But
want that?
exactly. But and attorneys, and regardless of what uh, uh, area of law they practice, it's all about helping. I
Mhm.
mean, whether it's criminal law, you're trying to get somebody out of jail, right? If it's
Sure.
family law, you're trying to resolve conflict. But the thing that I love about estate planning is that not only do you build out peace of mind for the family you're working with or the individual or couple, um, but long term, you're helping on the back end their family.
Yeah,
Something that might not happen for years, but it's proactively protecting the families, which
that's
is
right.
so amazing. So
It it is one of the things that feels nice about what I do. One of the takeaways I always try to leave people with is some variant of the statement. Look, I'm hoping to help you sleep better at night. Whether it's 5% better, 10% better. Look, we could all sleep better at night. And by spending a little bit of money now, hopefully I've helped you do that.
absolutely, yeah, you know, whatever the numbers are, a few $1,000s or whatever to create an estate plan now is certainly a lot better than spending 10 times that number going through probate and the time that it takes. But I've talked with so many estate plan attorneys. We've talked about, and a good estate plan is designed to do some really amazing things for a family beyond, transfer of wealth, protecting assets. Of course, keeping the family out of court is critical. Um, but there's always these stories that I talk to attorneys like yourself. It's like, let me tell you about this do-it-yourself will that went bad,
Yes.
and
Yes.
those kind of things. So as I started out with, I love stories. Some are really scary and frightening, and some a little less. But do you have something you'd love to share with us today?
Sure. Have you ever heard of the concept of simultaneous death?
Yes, I have, but I'm sure that I don't know what that exactly means. I do understand simultaneous death might be, Michelle and I both die at the same time, but I'm sure there's
Right.
variation in law as to what that means.
Sure. And I would have said a very similar thing to your statement half a year ago or so, in that simultaneous death was one of those concepts you touched on in trust and estates. And the professor would joke, well, you're not going to need this because it's never going to happen. But there's a statute on it, so don't worry. And lo and behold, I was introduced through a referral partner to a woman whose parents both died in a car accident. A truly terrible set of circumstances, and I'm not going to waste anybody's time on the specifics, but both parents die in a car accident in such a manner that you can't determine who died first. Um, so it's even worse than simply one parent dying and then someone else dying. It's both dying at the same time. And how does the court system then force you to navigate something that you certainly don't want to do twice, and you don't want to do twice at the same time, but you don't have a choice. In this incident, it was one reasonably well-educated couple. Um, the husband was certainly white collar. I can't recall what the wife did. But you would think educated enough to even have a basic will, even if it's 20 years old, to do the simple things of, name who would do the administrative work, waive a surety bond, determine who the beneficiaries are. Um,
Oh,
and they might,
let me do a quick sidebar here. So,
sure.
so what I did that it's kind of a legal term, sidebar, I think, whatever. Uh,
Yeah, yeah,
so, so what I'm hearing you say is that this couple that died did not have a will. So
correct.
we're saying intestate. So I assume
Yes,
if we
estate
had
will.
a will or a trust or something that, a little bit simpler. So this couple perishes with no will.
That's correct. They had to our knowledge, no estate planning documents. And that's part of the problem of this particular situation, in that, excuse me, the two heirs, they may or may not have talked to their parents about what their plans may have been, or vice versa, but everything the parents had was, in the car, on the iPad, that then of course was also destroyed. So you're piecing all of this together after the fact, going through, truly wrenching circumstances that just, must weigh on somebody significantly. But having to do this with no guidance, none of the estate planning documents, and those are just, even the simple ones are sets of instructions, no real instructions. And so you're force fit into whatever the statutory guidance of, in this case, Illinois, tells you. And the first thing I had to do was to tell this woman, I've never had this scenario of simultaneous death before. I know there's a statute on it because I've gone through Illinois' Probate Act enough to know, oh, look, there's a header there. Probably not going to have to click on this one. I did. Actually did exactly what logic would tell you to do, in that each spouse is deemed to get half of the assets that are joint assets. So the house is presumed to be split 50-50, for example. So that part was, from a practitioner's perspective, nice, in that there wasn't anything terribly unexpected. But it was something that nobody plans for. And yes, it's not, I'm sure a morbidity and mortality table would tell you that your chances are probably higher to win the lottery, or comparably higher to win the lottery than die at the same time as your spouse. But apparently it does happen.
And
this family is living proof.
And somebody usually wins the lot.
Yeah, right.
Not me. Of course, I might improve my odds if I actually bought a lottery ticket, but I figure my odds are just about the same whether I buy the ticket or not, so I'm not going to.
Yes.
But these things happen. So tell me this: the woman who came to you, was this a daughter?
Yeah, it was there were two daughters. And one of them, lived locally. The other lived out of state, not far, but it's certainly easier to have a point person, an administrator who's in state, than not. But yeah, she had to start dealing with all of that while going through the personal tragedy of parents are no longer here. I don't live down the street. What do we do with the house? Turned out that someone, we never figured out who, but somebody was stealing the parents' mail. I don't know why anyone would do that, but they stole a couple of weeks worth of mail or forwarded it somewhere else. We got that sorted out. Don't know what was lost in that period of time. But, again, it's just piecing together all of this stuff after the fact when you have essentially no information.
Yeah, far too often, even people with, a thorough estate plan, there's many times a lot of things that, family just aren't aware of. Beginning with, did mom and dad want to be cremated or they want to be buried?
Yeah.
And then it goes into, well, where were their bank accounts? Where did they hold, any investments, IRAs, 401ks? Is there a safe deposit box? Where is it? Where do we find the key? What credit cards do we have? Because we got to shut those off because of auto pay and recurring pays. And if they kept all this information and this content, as so many of us do, on our electronics, such as the iPad or the laptop, and that's destroyed in the accident, what a scavenger hunt that becomes.
It truly has been. And I can only speak to some of it, but what I can speak to is not that we're getting significant creditor notices, but we're getting more creditor notices than I typically see in the state, because I mean, this is clearly very sudden. And you have all of the revolving credit that hasn't been paid off, but also all of the accounts that the family isn't necessarily aware of.
Wow. And so you're working with the one daughter who's the point person. You get the other daughter. Been my experience that family can't usually always agree on things. I know in my family we couldn't agree on what movie to watch or what to eat for dinner, let alone so hopefully in this case the daughters are kind of simpatico, if you will.
So far, so good. Yes. It seems like everybody gets along, and in that way, it's certainly a fortunate outcome. I've been through enough probates where you have the one heir that's problematic for whatever reason, whether it's they want money now, whether it's they have some mental issues, whether they just don't like somebody. We've avoided that at the moment through now, and I'm hopeful that we will throughout, but it certainly can't make it easier under the circumstances.
But yeah, I've heard from people in the past, when a family member has died, the last living parent, and there's no trust in place. Even if there's a will, it still needs probate. And far too many times people think, okay, well, dad had some money. This is going to help me because my house is about to go in foreclosure or something. Well, yeah, it's going to help you, but it's not going to help you right now because the probate is
Yeah,
going to take some time.
probate takes some time, and I'm certainly not a probate hater, because it exists for a very important reason. I can explain that reason to clients, but it is going to take longer. It is going to cost more. As much as I'd enjoy billing people hourly, and what attorney doesn't, it's not the most efficient use of somebody's money, whether it's the parent's money or the client, the client's money. That's harder to stomach when you're getting invoices regularly as opposed to one.
Well, yeah. You know, so so a couple of questions that tie in. Obviously, the impact on the daughters. I mean, you can't even fathom the emotional impact of this.
Now,
Um, the financial aspect of it, obviously, the daughters probably have some out of pocket going forward, albeit they'll get that back
right.
when the state is settled. So how long has this been going on? And
Um, Go
and
ahead.
then
Sorry.
and then
I,
how long do you anticipate this whole process is going to take?
it's a great question. The estate opened in the spring, I believe. Maybe it was the early summer. Um, and it's really hard to say. And it's, I've settled some estates inside of a year. Those are certainly the outlier. Um, but this one is going to be really hard to gauge, because there may or may not be litigation involved as related to the accident. If there is, that could take several years. Um, I certainly don't want to be the attorney who's going to the judge and it's 2030 and they're saying, counsel, why do you have a 2023 probate open? I can't help it, Your Honor. This one has had things that have needed time, but it's the good news, if there is any, is the estate should be solvent. That there will be surplus money there, so we can do some partial distributions over time once we figure out what the debts look like. But that'll take more time and cost more money.
Wow. Yeah. So this is like, I mean, yeah, this scenario with this accident involved, I didn't even think of that. This is like, I mean, this is probate on steroids now. If you've got a scenario where there's this car accident fatality, um, if there's litigation involved with that, who's at fault,
Right.
all that kind of stuff. I mean, that can drag out for a long time.
And it can, and I've certainly heard attorneys and judges talking about that when either over Zoom court or in person, talking about they need more time because the wrongful death or personal injury or whatever matter, medical malpractice matter is ongoing. You never know when you're going to get one of those as a practitioner, and just trying to extrapolate what the timeline looks like, I can't.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Cause I mean, obviously you're, probably 4 or 5 months into this thing, you know, in all likelihood, it's going to take a year, but you don't have that crystal ball. I'm sure the family wants answers. How long is it going to take, Chase? And you're just like, man, I wish I could tell you.
Wish I could tell you. When you have more than one specialty involved, there's a whole lot outside of anybody's control, any one practitioner's control.
Right.
And
So
it,
how could this have been like, I mean, obviously, we don't know. I mean, I live in the greater Phoenix area, Maricopa County. We're the fifth most populated county in the United States. I can't turn the TV on when the news comes on and, I-17, I-10, Loop 101, something shut down because there's been a fatal accident. This happens
yeah.
every day. People get up in the morning and they're on their way to work and they expect tomorrow morning they'll do the same, but a lot of them won't. And
Right.
so while it's an outlier, it does happen. So what are the things that our listeners can think about, especially if they haven't done any estate planning? It may not be a car accident, right? It could be
Right.
anything, right? But
Well,
what could have avoided this situation had this couple done some planning?
there are certainly easy things from an estate planning perspective, whether or not you have a will. Make sure your beneficiary designations are up to date. Make as many assets as you can non-probate, whether you do a will-based plan or a trust-based plan. The more you can have beneficiaries on assets, the more those are, I don't want to say immediately, but certainly very quickly distributed to the beneficiaries. And that certainly helps. Um, you
Do
know,
do payable on death PODs on like bank accounts and stuff,
Mhm.
does that avoid, regardless of if there's a will, does that avoid probate and those things? Is
Yes,
that like a
it's
beneficiary?
it's at least in Illinois, I can say that. It becomes essentially private contract between account custodian and beneficiary. Show up with a death certificate or provide a death certificate, and it's either fill out a couple of forms or they cut you a check depending on the type of the account. So that's a really powerful mechanism. In Illinois, you can even do that on houses. Illinois was one of the earlier adopters of that. I think about 2/3 of states have done that. And that can be a really, for families who the house is the big probate asset, that's a really potentially powerful way to take things from the court process, the probate pot, to a non-probate process.
Wow.
Um,
So that's really good advice to our listeners. I mean, I'm always going to encourage everyone to have an estate plan. And whether you have a lot of money or not a lot of money, a trust is an amazing instrument to
yeah,
to get things done. But for those who don't have any kind of a planning, while I still encourage you to do that, think of these things that Chase just mentioned. Be sure beneficiaries are up to date, payable on death on the bank accounts. Um, and if you're in a state like Illinois where you can have a payable or transfer on death of the residents, wow, I didn't even know that. So that's awesome.
it's, I mean, you can almost get to basically every asset as a non-probate asset, or has a beneficiary, I should say, other than personal property. In Illinois, you can even do that with a car. Not that you necessarily would go into the DMV to do that. I've had one or two clients do it. But there's a bunch of things that are, you might say, estate planning for the 99%. And those are really good options for people. If you're certainly cost conscious, and I can understand why a lot of people are. A trust that's going to cost thousands of dollars or something that's going to cost a smaller percentage of that. Got to weigh the benefits or detriments of each framework, but I can understand and will recommend something like that for a number of people. The other thing I always try to do is encourage people to keep lists of their contact people, in the sense of who are your professionals, life insurance, financial advisor, attorney, home insurance person, accountant. I try to compile that. I kind of force people to go through that as an intake mechanism. Not necessarily because I need it now, but it's an organizational tool. And if those relationships are still there, that really helps people to, when they're going through a probate or even trust administration, who do I contact for taxes? Who do I contact for, what's the account over there? Tell me where you have bank accounts now.
That's so critical. So when we built the My Life Enriches platform, which is actually designed to do all these things, right?
Right.
And the end game is to make things easier for family. Because I always say, what do you want the experience to be like, for family, right? So, but before we build it, I mean, one of my things when I was going through the thinking process, it dawned, I said, my kids would not know who my attorney is. They would not know who my accountant is. They don't know who my financial advisor, life insurance guy is. They don't know all the banks that I bank at and the type of accounts that I have. And they don't know where my assets are located. They don't know where, my IRAs are held and those things. And that's the short list.
Well, that's right. And I often use myself as an example, and I'll continue to do so. My wife and I had been married for several years before I made sure she knew who the accountant was. And she was introduced to the life insurance guy that I used when we updated a policy for me after my son was born. Now she's working with him, professionally and personally. But I mean, those are really important pieces of information that even if I had as a printout, or not a printout, but like a Word document on my computer, how do you necessarily get to that if you don't know the password or have the device?
Exactly. Such great information and advice. And I know this has been really informative for me because, obviously not familiar really with simultaneous death, but, obviously the nightmare that can occur if there's not some basic, planning and things involved. What didn't I ask you that maybe I should?
I mean, I think you hit really the important notes there of, how do people do basic things, even if you're not necessarily paying for an estate plan. Some of the most important advice or most powerful, beneficial advice I give people, that it doesn't cost anything. Again, it's the beneficiary designations. It's know who your contact people are. That can easily be 90 to 95% of your work, that you need to do. Not necessarily like you said, John, where are all the assets? But if you know where to start, it's going to make things a whole lot easier later. And if there's a takeaway, I hope it's something like that.
Yeah. And it's so true. My wish and prayer for all of our listeners is that, the date of their departure is years and years down the road. But since
Of
we didn't
course.
know that, we need to think about what do we want the experience to be like for our family. And, sadness and grief are normal, but the confusion, frustration, added stress, time, expense, anxiety, all those are not normal. And we can prevent those if we
It
do some planning.
can certainly prevent a significant portion of it. And, thoughtful planning can do uh, really good things for people in terms of mitigating those factors.
Hey, as we wind down our time here, I just wanted to say, look, if for our listeners, if you are in the greater Chicago area or in Illinois, um, if this has triggered some thoughts that maybe you should do some planning, be it a simple will or more of a comprehensive estate plan, reach out to Chase. I mean, he's a great guy. We've known each other for probably about half a year or so now, and just really getting to know each other. And he's genuinely there to help. And God forbid you're in a situation right now where you've lost someone and you're not sure how to navigate, the nightmare that lay ahead. Reach out to Chase. How can they get a hold of you, Chase?
Well, I phone, email, my website are all very good ways. Do you want me to give a phone number and an email address? Whatever is easiest at that point.
Yeah, I'm not sure anyone has a pen in their hand.
Right. That's
If
kind
they're
of what I figured.
driving, I sure hope they don't. But what I'm going to do is in the bottom of the show notes, folks, go to the bottom. I'm going to have a link out from there directly to Chase's website. I'm going to have a link to his email. We'll have his phone number. And for those of you like myself that utilize LinkedIn a lot, there's a link to his LinkedIn profile. Feel free to reach out and connect to him there because you can certainly message there as well.
Right.
Awesome. Well, Chase, thank you so much for joining us today. It's truly been insightful, and we'll look forward to another conversation.
Very good, John. I hope you have a wonderful, you and your listeners have a wonderful holiday weekend.
Thank you. You too. And listeners, thanks again for joining us. Be sure and tune in next time. And as always, plan ahead and make it a great day. Thank you for listening. You can subscribe, listen, and download all the Estate Planning Nightmares episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. We'd be grateful if you would save our show to your favorites and share them with others. Remember, life is messy, but death is messier. You can learn more about My Life and Wishes Legacy Vault at www.mylifeandwishes.com. Plan ahead and make it a great day.